The great hall of Avalon Welve Station was filled with creatures from 1,000 worlds. Some had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Others had too many eyes, or not enough limbs. A few existed as clouds of glowing gas, speaking through translator machines that hummed and clicked. But among all these strange beings, the humans stood out for one simple reason. They looked boring, Ambassador. Kong Yuna walked through the crowd with her head held high. She wore a simple gray suit. No armor, no weapons, not even a ceremonial blade like the warriors of other species carried. Her assistant, a young woman named Ohana, followed close behind with a tablet computer and a calm expression. "The Velthari delegation has arrived," Hannah whispered. "They brought warships. 7 of them. They are parked just outside the station." Yuna nodded, but did not change her pace. "They always bring warships. It makes them feel important." For 300 years, humanity had been part of the Galactic Council. In that time, they had earned a reputation. Humans were traders, diplomats, problem solvers. When 2 species wanted to kill each other over a border dispute, they called the humans. When a trade deal fell apart, humans fixed it. They were useful, helpful, and completely, utterly harmless, at least. That was what everyone believed. The Velthari were different from humans in every way that mattered. They stood 8 feet tall. Their skin was dark red and covered in natural armor plates. Their eyes burned yellow like dying stars. They had conquered 12 species in the last 1,000 years, and they were very proud of this fact. High Admiral Voreth led their delegation. He walked like he owned every room he entered. His boots struck the metal floor with sounds like hammers. When he saw Ambassador Kong Yuna, he smiled. It was not a nice smile, Voreth said, his voice booming across the hall. "The humans have sent their best speaker. Tell me, little ambassador, do your people still remember how to hold weapons? Or have you forgotten that as well?" Laughter rippled through certain parts of the crowd. The warrior species found this very funny. The Velthari, the Kroth, the Dominion of Ash. They all enjoyed mocking humanity. Yuna smiled politely. "We remember many things, High Admiral. We simply choose not to use them." Choice Voreth spat the word like it tasted bad. "The excuse of the weak. When you have power, you use it. That is the natural law." Perhaps Yuna replied, "But we have found that talking usually works better than fighting." Voreth stepped closer. He towered over her. His shadow covered her completely. "Then let us see how well you talk your way out of this." He raised one armored hand, and a hologram appeared in the air. It showed 3 planets. Green and blue, beautiful, full of life. "These worlds belong to us now," Voreth declared. "New Busan, Sejong Prime, Hinam Colony. They sit within space that the Velthari Empire claims. You have 60 cycles to remove your people. After that, we will remove them for you." The hall went silent. Even the translator machines seemed to hold their breath. Admiral Park Do-yeon stood at the back of the human delegation. He was an older man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had commanded Earth's 7th Fleet for 20 years. In all that time, he had never fired a single weapon. His ships carried supplies, medical equipment, emergency aid. They were painted white, the color of peace. But as Do-yeon listened to Voreth's words, something old and cold stirred in his chest. Something that every human carried but rarely acknowledged. Yuna's expression did not change. "Those colonies hold 14 million people, families, children. You cannot simply demand that we abandon them." "I can demand whatever I wish," Voreth replied. "We are strong. You are weak. This is how the galaxy works. Your people have forgotten this truth. Perhaps it is time you remembered. And if we refuse?" Voreth's smile grew wider. "Then we will teach you what happens to species that refuse the Velthari. There are 11 species who learned this lesson before you. Would you like to know how many of them still exist?" The number everyone knew was 3. 3 species had survived Velthari conquest. The others had been wiped out completely. Captain Beek Jiwoo stood beside Admiral Do-yeon. She was young, 32 years old, She had joined the fleet because she wanted to help people. Her ship, the Horizon, had delivered food to starving colonies and medicine to plague worlds. She had never thought about war. It seemed like something from old books, ancient history. But as she watched Vora threaten her people, she felt something strange. Her hands wanted to become fists. Her jaw wanted to tighten. Her heart beat faster, and not from fear. 72 hours, Una said quietly. Give us 72 hours to respond to your demands. Oh, Voroth laughed. You want time to run? To beg? Fine. I will grant you this small mercy. 72 of your Earth hours, then we come for what is ours. He turned and walked away. His delegation followed. Their boots struck the floor like war drums. The hall slowly returned to noise. Delegates from neutral species whispered to each other. Some looked at the humans with pity, others with contempt. A few, the older ones who had lived a very long time, looked at them with something else. Something like Worry Observer Killith, a tall insect-like being from the Shovani Intelligence Bureau, recorded everything. Her species had monitored humanity for centuries. They had files on human history. They knew about the wars humans had fought among themselves long ago. But those files were old, dusty. Nobody had looked at them in generations. Humans were harmless now. Everyone knew this. Killith watched Ambassador Kong Yuna gather her delegation. The human's face was calm, professional, but something about her eyes had changed. They were harder now. Colder. Interesting, Killith muttered to herself, and made a note to review those old files. On the shuttle back to their main ship, Admiral Doyan sat in silence. Captain Beak Juwu sat across from him. Sir, she said quietly, what are we going to do? Doyan looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, 14 million humans were living their lives. Raising children, building homes. They did not know yet that an empire wanted to destroy them. I do not know, he admitted. But I think we need to make a call. A call that has not been made in a very long time. Ambassador Kong Yuna joined them. She looked tired, older than she had looked that morning. I have spoken with Earth, she said. The President is calling an emergency council. They are opening the Hall of Remembrance. Captain Beak looked confused. The Hall of Remembrance? What is that? Admiral Doyon and Ambassador Kang exchanged a look. It was a look that held 300 years of secrets. It is where we keep our memories, Dojan said softly. The memories we chose to forget. But outside the window, the stars continued to shine. They did not know that everything was about to change. New soul had grown around the bones of the old city. Towers of glass and steel reached toward the clouds. Flying cars moved through the air like schools of fish. Parks and gardens covered the rooftops, making the city look like a mountain covered in green life. It was beautiful, peaceful, a city that had not seen violence in 300 years. But beneath the surface, deep underground, there was a place that remembered darker times, President. Chomaran walked through corridors that had not felt footsteps in 200 years. The lights flickered on as she passed, waking from their long sleep. Dust covered everything. The air smelled old and forgotten. She was not alone. General Shin Taiwu walked beside her. He was a large man with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they could crush stone. Officially, he commanded Earth's Ceremonial Defense Force, a group of soldiers who marched in parades and stood guard. At government buildings, decorations, nothing more at least. That was what the galaxy believed. Behind them came Dr. Im Soo-jin, the chief archivist. She was a small woman with thick glasses and trembling hands. She had spent her entire career cataloging old books and historical records. Safe things. Boring things. She had never expected to be here. This is it, Soo-jin said, her voice echoing in the empty corridor. The Hall of Remembrance. Nobody has entered since the Third Unification Treaty? The door was massive. 10 meters tall, made of metal so thick that it could survive a nuclear blast. There were no handles, no visible locks. Just a single screen that asked for authorization. President Cho placed her hand on the screen. Authorization: Cho Moran, President of Earth. Emergency Protocol 7. The screen turned red. A voice spoke from hidden speakers. Warning: opening this vault will trigger notification to all human colonies. Are you certain you wish to proceed? Yes. The door began to open. The sound was like thunder, like the earth itself was groaning. Inside the Hall of Remembrance stretched into darkness. As the lights came on, one by one, the three humans saw what their ancestors had locked away. Weapons, thousands of them, millions of them. Guns that could fire bullets faster than sound. Missiles that could crack open planets. Bombs that could poison the air for 1,000 years. Chemical weapons. Biological weapons. Things that humanity had created in its darkest hours. But the weapons were not the worst part. The walls were covered with screens. As the power returned, these screens began to glow. They showed images, videos, records of human history that had been hidden from the galaxy. World War I, trenches filled with dying men, gas that burned lungs and melted skin, 20 million dead. World War II, cities burning, mushroom clouds rising over Japan. CA. MPs were humans murdered other humans by the millions. 60 million dead, the Cold War, enough nuclear weapons to destroy Earth 100 times over. Two nations pointing death at each other for 50 years, the resource wars, the water conflicts, the genetic purges. War after war after war. Dr. Imsujin fell to her knees. Tears ran down her face. I knew, she whispered. I knew we had been violent. But this, I did not know it was this bad. General Shin stood straight and still. His face showed no emotion. This is why we chose peace, he said. Because we knew what we could become. President Cho walked deeper into the hall. She stopped before a massive display that showed a single number. A number that made her heart feel cold. 273 million, she read aloud. That is how many humans killed other humans in the 20th century alone. 100 years. Almost 300 million dead. By our own hands. She turned to face the others. Her eyes were hard, determined. The Velthari think we are weak. They think we forgot how to fight. They are wrong. We did not forget. We chose to stop. There is a difference. General Shin nodded slowly. The defense systems are still operational. Every colony has them. Hidden. Dormant. Waiting. Our trading fleet, President Cho continued. How long to convert them? 48 hours. The military configurations were built into every ship. We just never activated them. Dr. Sujin looked up from the floor. Her face was pale. You planned for this? All along? Our ancestors planned for this, the president replied. They knew that someday the galaxy might force us to remember what we are. They hoped it would never happen. They were wrong. She walked to a console at the center of the hall. It was covered in dust. She wiped it clean with her sleeve. Beneath the dust, there was a single red button protected by a glass cover. Hey, this will send a message to every human colony, she explained. Every ship, every station, every person who carries human blood, it will tell them to prepare, to remember, to wake up. Her hand hovered over the button. The Velthari have threatened our children, she said quietly. They have threatened to destroy our homes. They gave us 72 hours to surrender. They think we will beg for mercy. She lifted the glass cover. They do not understand. Humans do not beg. We survive. And when something threatens our survival, we do not hide. We do not run. She pressed the button. Across the galaxy, the message traveled at faster than light speed. It reached ships and stations and colonies. It reached soldiers who had never held weapons and teachers who had never seen blood. It reached children who had grown up believing that war was a fairy tale. The message was simple. 3 words that every human recognized. 3 words that their ancestors had said in their darkest hours. 3 words that meant everything was about to change. The giant. On New Busan, a farming colony of 2 million people, a man named Yu Jun, who read the message on his tablet. He was a simple man, a rice farmer. He had never held a gun in his life, but his grandfather had taught him something. Something that every human grandparent taught their grandchildren: how to fight, how to survive, how to become dangerous when danger came. Junho put down his farming tools. He walked to his basement. He opened a box that had sat untouched for generations. Inside was a rifle, old but functional. Beside it was a manual, a training guide written 200 years ago. "I hoped I would never need this," he said to his wife. "But they threatened our children." His wife nodded. She reached into the box and pulled out a second rifle. "Then we teach them why that was a mistake." Across all human space, similar scenes played out. Farmers became soldiers. Teachers became tacticians. Scientists, who had spent their lives studying peace, began studying war. The transformation took 48 hours. When it was complete, the galaxy did not recognize humanity anymore. The trading ships had changed. Their white paint was gone, replaced by dark gray armor. Hidden panels had opened to reveal weapons that had been sleeping for centuries. Each ship now bristled with guns and missiles and things that the galaxy had never seen before. The colonies had changed. Planetary shields hummed to life. Defense satellites woke from their long sleep. Underground bunkers opened, revealing armies that had trained in secret for generations, and the people had changed. The soft diplomats and gentle traders were gone. In their place stood something older, something harder, something that remembered what it meant to fight for survival. President Cho Moran addressed the galaxy from the Hall of Remembrance. Behind her, the screens showed humanity's bloody history. She did not hide from it. She did not apologize for it. "You called us weak," she said. "You called us cowards. You threatened our homes and our families. You gave us 72 hours to surrender." She smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We've used 48 of those hours. Not to prepare our surrender, but to remember who we really are. We are the species that almost destroyed itself a dozen times. We are the species that built weapons that could crack planets. We are the species that chose peace because we knew the alternative. She leaned forward. "You have 24 hours left. Use them wisely." Observer Killith had not slept in 3 days. Her compound eyes burned with exhaustion. Her mandibles clicked nervously as she scrolled through report after report. Around her, the Sholvani Intelligence Bureau had descended into chaos. "This is impossible," her supervisor muttered. "Absolutely impossible." On the main screen, humanity's transformation played out in terrifying detail. Ships that had carried grain and medicine now carried death. Colonies that had grown flowers now grew armies. A species that had been the galaxy's favorite joke was suddenly not funny at all. Killith pulled up the old files, the ones nobody had looked at in generations. The ones that described humanity before they joined the galactic community. "Look at this," she said, her voice shaking. World War II. A single conflict. 60 million dead. They killed 60 million of their own kind in 6 years. Her supervisor leaned closer to the screen. "That must be wrong. Our files must be corrupted." "They are not corrupted." Killith switched to another file. World War I, 20 million dead. The Cold War. 50,000 nuclear weapons pointed at each other for 5 decades. They came within minutes of destroying their entire planet. Multiple times? Why did nobody review these files? Because we assumed they were irrelevant. Humans are peaceful now. Everyone knows that. Killith laughed bitterly. We were wrong. They are not peaceful. They are controlled. There is a very important difference. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening. Intelligence agencies that had ignored humanity for centuries were suddenly very interested. Military commanders who had dismissed human forces were suddenly very worried. On an Avalent Welv station, Counselor Nethra of the Alori watched the human broadcasts with ancient eyes. She was over 2,000 years old. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had witnessed the Velthari conquer world after world, but she had never seen anything like this. "They are not preparing for war," she said to her aide. "They are waking up from a very long sleep." And whatever is waking up, I do not think the Velthri understand what they have done. Her aide, a younger Alari with silver skin, looked confused. Counselor, the Velthri have the largest fleet in the galaxy. They have conquered 12 species. Surely they can handle humans. Nethra shook her head slowly. The Velthri conquer through strength. They find species weaker than themselves and crush them. It is simple, direct, effective. But humans are different. How so? The Velthri have been the strongest species in their region of space for 1,000 years. They have never faced a true challenge. They do not know how to lose. They do not know how to adapt. Nethra pointed at the screen, where human ships were forming into battle groups. Humans spent 10,000 years fighting each other. The strongest human armies were destroyed by weaker ones who used better tactics. The largest human empires fell to smaller nations who refused to surrender. Humans do not fight like the Velthri. They fight like survivors. High Admiral Vorath received the intelligence reports in his command ship. He read them once. Then he laughed and threw the tablet across the room. Propaganda, he declared. Human lies designed to frighten us. Their ships are trading vessels with guns attached. Their soldiers are farmers with rifles. They have not fought a real war in 300 years. His second-in-command, a younger Velthri named Korith, was not so sure. Admiral, our scouts report that their fleet movements are highly coordinated. Their formations suggest advanced tactical training. This does not match our intelligence. Their intelligence is outdated. Ours is current. We have watched them for decades. They are soft, weak. They talk instead of fight. Vorath stood and walked to the window of his command ship. Outside, the Velthri fleet stretched into the distance. 700 warships, the largest single force in the quadrant. When they see our full strength, they will surrender. They always surrender. But on the human colony of New Busan, nobody was thinking about surrender. Yu Junho stood in a line with 2,000 other farmers. In front of them, an old woman with white hair and calm eyes walked back and forth. Her name was Ma Yunji, and she had been a schoolteacher for 40 years. Now she was teaching a different kind of lesson. The rifle is an extension of your body, she said, her voice carrying across the training field. You do not point it. You do not aim it. You become one with it. Your eyes are its eyes. Your breath is its breath. Your will is its will. Junho had wondered how a schoolteacher knew so much about weapons. Then he learned that every human adult receives secret military training once per year. They called it camping trips or fitness retreats. In reality, they were learning to fight. We hoped we would never need this knowledge, Ma Yunji had explained. But hope is not a strategy. Preparation is a strategy. And humanity has been preparing for this moment for 300 years. On the other side of the colony, Captain Beek Jiwoo walked through the Defense Command Center. Screens covered every wall. Each screen showed a different part of the colony's newly awakened defense grid. Orbital defense platforms online, a technician reported. Planetary shields at 60% and rising. Ground-to-space missiles ready for launch. Jiwoo shook her head in disbelief. I lived here for a year. I never knew any of this existed. That was the point, Admiral Park Do-yan replied. He had arrived on New Busan 6 hours ago to personally oversee the defense preparations. Our ancestors buried these systems deep. They hid them from the galaxy. They hid them from ourselves. Because they knew that if we remembered we could fight, we might forget why we chose not to. And now we remember everything. The galactic news networks broadcast humanity's transformation around the clock. Species that had never paid attention to humans suddenly could not look away. On the Kroth homeworld, warriors who had mocked human weakness watched footage of human soldiers training. These soldiers moved differently than the Kroth expected. They were not big or strong. They did not roar challenges or display their muscles. They were quiet, efficient, deadly. They'd fight like hunters, a Kroth general muttered. Patient, focused. They do not waste energy on displays. Every movement has purpose. That is concerning, his aide replied. That is terrifying. On a neutral trading station, merchants from a dozen species gathered around a public screen. Historical footage from human archives played on repeat. They watched tanks roll across burning cities. They watched aircraft drop bombs from skies filled with fire. They watched soldiers fight through mud and blood and never stop moving forward. I thought humans were traitors, a small furry creature said. They are, an older merchant replied. But before they were traitors, they were this. And apparently, they never forgot how. Observer Killeth finished her report at dawn on the third day. She had reviewed every file, analyzed every piece of footage, compiled every relevant fact about humanity's military history. Her conclusion was simple and horrifying. Classification change recommended, she wrote. Previous classification, prey species, docile, non-threatening, limited military capability. New classification, apex predator, extremely dangerous. Self-limiting by choice, not capability. She added a final note at the bottom. Recommendation, do not engage. Do not threaten. Do not provoke. Humans have spent 3 centuries proving they prefer peace. If we force them to choose war, we will learn why they made that preference in the first place. She sent the report to her superiors. They read it. They believed it. But High Admiral Vorath did not receive this report. And even if he had, he would not have believed it. The Velthari fleet continued toward human space. 700 warships, the largest invasion force in a century. They did not know that they were flying toward their own destruction. On Earth, President Cho Moran watched the Velthari fleet approach on a massive display screen. Around her, military commanders and civilian leaders prepared for what was coming. They are not turning back, General Shintaiwu reported. Our deadline expires in 12 hours? The president nodded slowly. Then, in 12 hours, we will show them what they have awakened. Ambassador Kung Yuna stood beside her. We should make one final attempt at peace. Offer them a way out that lets them save face. You will, President Cho agreed. We will give them every chance to walk away. But if they refuse, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Everyone in the room knew what would happen if the Velthari refused. War. Real war. The kind of war that humanity had sworn to never fight. Again, and the galaxy would watch in. Horror as humans remembered exactly who they were. Final hours felt like years. Ambassador. Kong Yuna stood before the Galactic Council one last time. The Great Hall of Avalon 12 was packed with delegates from every species in the known galaxy. They had come to witness history. Some hoped for peace. Others expected entertainment. None of them truly understood what they were about to see. Yuna wore the same simple gray suit she always wore. No armor, no weapons. Her face was calm. Her voice was steady. But her eyes had changed. They held something old and cold. Something that humans had buried for 300 years. High Admiral Vorath, she began. On behalf of the human species, I am authorized to present our response to your ultimatum. Vorath stood on the opposite side of the hall. He towered over the delegates around him. His red skin gleamed under the lights. His yellow eyes burned with contempt. Finally, he said, I have waited long enough for your surrender. We do not surrender, Yuna replied. We never have. We never will. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Vorth's eyes narrowed. Then you choose extinction? We choose neither. Yuna activated a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy with human territory highlighted in blue. We present the following terms. First, the immediate withdrawal of your ultimatum regarding our colonies. Second, a formal apology to the 14 million humans you threatened with destruction. Third, reparations to be negotiated through proper diplomatic channels. Vorath laughed. The sound echoed through the hall like thunder. You dare make demands of us. The Velthari Empire does not apologize. The Velthari Empire does not pay reparations. The Velthari Empire takes what it wants and destroys those who resist. I am aware of your history, Yuna said quietly. 12 species conquered, 9 of them extinct. 3 surviving as slaves. Very impressive. We are glad you understand. Well, I understand perfectly. Una stepped forward. I understand that you have built your empire by threatening species weaker than yourselves. I understand that you have never faced an enemy who could truly fight back. I understand that you believe strength is measured by how many others you can destroy. She stopped walking. She stood in the center of the hall, small and human, and completely unafraid. Let me tell you what I understand about humanity. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We created weapons that could end all life on our planet. We killed hundreds of millions of our own kind. We burned cities and poisoned lands and committed horrors that I hope you never learn to imagine. The hall had gone completely silent. And then we stopped. Not because we were conquered. Not because we were weak, but because we looked at what we had become and decided to be something else. We buried our weapons. We hid our history. We spent 300 years learning to solve problems without violence. She turned to face Vorath directly. You think this makes us weak? You are wrong. It makes us terrifying. Because every human alive carries the knowledge of what we can do. Every human child learns the history we try to hide. We know exactly what kind of monster we can become. And we choose every single day not to become it. Vorath stepped toward her. Pretty words. But words do not win wars. Una agreed. Actions win wars. And if you force us to act, you will not like the results. Enough. Vorath raised his armored hand. Your time is up. Your colonies are ours. Your species will learn its place. Ambassador Kong Yuna did something unexpected. She smiled. Very well. Then I am authorized to deliver the following message from President Cho Moran of Earth. She touched a device on her wrist. A hologram appeared above her head. It showed President Cho standing in the Hall of Remembrance. Behind her, the screens displayed humanity's violent history. Burning cities. Nuclear explosions. Fields covered with the dead. To the Velthri Empire, President Cho's recorded voice filled the hall. You have threatened our people. You have refused our offer of peace. You have made your choice. Now hear ours. The hologram changed. It showed the human fleet. No longer white trading vessels. Now gray warships covered in weapons, thousands of them moving through space in perfect formation. The United Human Confederacy hereby declares war on the Velthri Empire. Gasps echoed through the hall. Several delegates fled toward the exits. Others stood frozen in shock. President Cho's voice continued. This declaration comes with a promise. We will not stop when you ask us to. We will not negotiate while your forces threaten our homes. We will not accept surrender until your people understand, truly understand, why we chose peace. The hologram focused on President Cho's face. Her expression was hard as stone. You wanted to see what humans can do. You wanted to test the species that talks instead of fights. Very well. Consider this your test. Watch closely. Learn well. And pray that when we are finished, you remember how to beg for mercy. The hologram disappeared. Ambassador Kong Yuna looked around the silent hall. Every eye was on her. Ever. Why being was holding their breath. The human delegation will now withdraw from Avalon Welve, she announced. Any non-human vessels in the combat zone will be considered neutral and will not be targeted. We recommend immediate evacuation for all civilian traffic. She walked toward the exit. Her assistant, Ohana, followed High Admiral Vorath, found his voice. You think you can threaten us? You are nothing. Your species is nothing. Yuna stopped at the door. She turned back one final time. Admiral Vorath, in the next 3 weeks, you will learn something important about humans. Something that every species has learned throughout our history. Something that your empire has never had to face. And what is that? We do not fight to conquer. We do not fight for glory or territory or pride. We fight to protect the things we love. And there is nothing in this galaxy more dangerous than a human who is fighting for their family. She left. The door closed behind her. Across the galaxy, the declaration of war spread at faster than light speed. News networks broadcast it on every channel. Governments issued emergency statements. Military forces went on high alert. Observer Killith watched from her station, her compound eyes wide with horror. Her report had been ignored. Her warnings had been dismissed. And now it was too late. "May the ancestors help us all," she whispered, on the bridge of the human flagship, Indomitable. Admiral Park Do-yan received confirmation that the declaration had been delivered. "All ships report ready, Captain Beak," Ji-woo announced from beside him. "The fleet is awaiting orders." Do-yan stood and walked to the main viewport. Ahead, the stars stretched into infinity. Somewhere out there, the Velthari fleet was approaching. "I hoped this day would never come," he said quietly. "I spent my entire career believing that we would never have to fight, and now I will do what my ancestors did. What every human generation has done when faced with a threat to our survival, he turned to face his crew. I will fight. I will win. And when it is over, I will help rebuild what we destroyed." He sat back in his command chair. "All ships. This is Admiral Park. The time for talking is over. The time for fighting has begun. Remember who we are. Remember why we buried our swords? Remember why we are drawing them again?" His voice hardened. "They threatened our children. They threatened our homes. They think we are prey because we chose to stop hunting. Show them their mistake. Show them what happens when the sleeping giant wakes." He raised his hand. "All ships, engage." The human fleet moved forward. Weapon systems hummed to life. Targeting computers locked onto enemy positions, and the galaxy watched, holding its breath as humanity went to war for the first time in 300 years. Nobody knew what would happen next, but everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same. The first battle lasted 6 hours. High Admiral Vorath had sent 200 warships to crush the human colony of New Busan. He expected the colonists to flee. He expected the defenders to crumble. He expected victory within minutes. He was wrong. The Velthari fleet dropped out of hyperspace, above New Busan, expecting to find farming villages and frightened civilians. Instead, they found a planet transformed into a fortress. Defense satellites opened fire before the Velthari could even scan the surface. Planetary shields blocked orbital bombardment. Ground 2 space missiles streaked upward like angry hornets. "What is happening?" Vorath demanded from his command ship, watching the battle through long-range sensors. "Our intelligence said this was a farming world." "It was a farming world," his second-in-command Korath replied, his voice shaking. 48 hours ago. On the surface, Yu Junho crouched behind a barrier with his rifle ready. Around him, 2,000 other farmers had become soldiers. They wore simple clothing. They carried old weapons. They looked nothing like the gleaming Velthari warriors, but they fought like demons. The first wave of Velthari landing ships touched down, expecting to meet scattered resistance. Instead, they met coordinated ambushes. The humans did not stand in neat lines waiting to be shot. They hid. They struck. They vanished. They fight without honor. A Velthari commander screamed into his communicator. They attack from shadows. They refuse proper combat. Mahunji, the schoolteacher turned warrior, listened to this complaint on a captured radio and laughed. "Honor is for people who can afford to lose," she told her squad. "We cannot afford to lose, so we fight to win." The humans used tactics that the Velthari had never seen. Small groups working together without verbal commands. Traps that seemed random, but were carefully planned. Weapons that seemed primitive, but killed just as effectively as advanced ones, and they did not stop. Even when wounded, even when outnumbered, even when victory seemed impossible, a Velthari soldier cornered a human woman and her 2 children in a destroyed building. He raised his weapon, confident in his superiority. The woman had no armor, no military training that he could see. Just a kitchen knife and absolute terror in her eyes, she attacked anyway. The Velthari soldiers survived, barely. Later, he reported to his commanders with horror in his voice. She was protecting her young. She knew she could not win. She attacked anyway. What kind of species does that? The answer came from every human soldier on the planet. We do. Captain Baek Ju-woo led the space battle above New Busan. Her ship, the Horizon, had been a diplomatic vessel just days ago. Now it moved through the Velthari formation like a wolf through sheep. Enemy flagship targeted, her weapons officer reported. Firing solution locked. Fire. The Horizon's main weapons tore through the Velthari command ship's shields. Secondary weapons finished the job. In the vacuum of space, the flagship broke apart silently. Ji-woo watched with grim satisfaction. They killed 3 of our transport ships in the opening attack. Civilian ships carrying families. 247 dead, including 83 children. Her crew said nothing. They did not need to. Every human in the fleet knew the numbers. Every human in the fleet had seen the faces of the dead. They fought accordingly. The Battle of New Busan ended when the last Velthari ship retreated into hyperspace. Of the 200 ships that had attacked, 43 survived to flee. On the ground, the Velthari landing force was completely destroyed. Human losses were significant. 12 ships destroyed. 3,000 soldiers killed. But New Busan remained free, and the galaxy watched in shocked silence. Observer Keyleth recorded everything. Her reports to Shulvani Command grew increasingly desperate. The humans are not fighting like any species we have studied, she wrote. They adapt to Velthari tactics within hours. They share information across their fleet instantly. When one group discovers a weakness, every other group knows about it within minutes. It is as if they are a single organism with millions of minds. She added a note that would become famous throughout the galaxy. We thought they were prey animals who forgot how to fight. They are predators who chose to stop hunting. Now they have started again. Heaven help us all. The war continued for 3 weeks. Human fleets pushed into Velthari space with terrifying efficiency. They did not burn worlds. They did not slaughter civilians. They targeted military installations with surgical precision, but they did not stop. They did not slow down. They did not negotiate. Admiral Park Do-yeon captured a Velthari military base on their 3rd most important world. He broadcast a message to the entire Velthari Empire. Your leaders threatened to kill human children. Your soldiers attacked human families. Your empire believed it could destroy us because we chose peace. His face filled screens across Velthari space. You were wrong. We chose peace because we know what happens when we choose war. Now you know too. Your fleets are broken. Your armies are scattered. Your empire stands on the edge of destruction. He leaned forward. This is what humans do to those who threaten our young. Remember this. Teach your children to remember this. Because if you ever threaten us again, we will not stop with your military. We will end your civilization. And we will be right to do it. High Admiral Vorath died in the final battle, refusing to retreat, refusing to surrender. His last words, recorded by his ship's systems, were simple. I was wrong. The Velthari Empire requested unconditional surrender 18 days after the war began. Ambassador Kang Yuna accepted the surrender on Avalant. In the same hall where the ultimatum had been delivered, the Velthari delegate was young, barely an adult by their species standards. The old leaders were all dead or in hiding. We submit to human judgment, the young Velthari said. We await your punishment. Yuna looked at this frightened creature and felt something unexpected. Pity. We do not want punishment, she said quietly. We never wanted this war. You forced it upon us? Then what do you want? We want you to understand. To truly understand why we chose peace 300 years ago. Not because we were weak. Because we knew what strength without wisdom leads to. It leads to this. She gestured at the reports of destruction that filled the screens around them. Broken fleets. Dead soldiers. Grieving families. This is what war creates. This is why we hate it. She stood and walked toward the young Velthari. Your empire conquered through fear. You believed that the strong take from the weak. You were wrong. True strength is not the ability to destroy. It is the ability to build, to heal, to protect. She extended her hand. We will not destroy your empire. We will help you rebuild it. We will teach you what we learned through centuries of bloodshed. We will show you that there is another way. The young Velthary stared at her hand in confusion. After everything we did? After we threatened your children? After we started this war? Especially after that, Una smiled sadly. Because if we destroyed you in revenge, we would become what we hate most. We would become what we used to be. And we swore never to go back to that. She addressed the entire Galactic Council. Let this be a lesson to every species in this room. Humanity does not want war. We will do almost anything to avoid it. But if you force us to fight, we will fight with everything we have. And when we win, we will offer you our hand. She looked around at the hundreds of alien faces watching her, because that is what makes us human. Not our capacity for violence, though that capacity is vast. Not our weapons or our tactics or our terrible history. What makes us human is our ability to choose mercy, even when we have the power to choose destruction. She turned back to the young Velthary. Take our hand. Learn from us. And help us build a galaxy where no species ever has to make the choice we made 3 weeks ago. The young Velthary reached out and took her hand. The war was over. In the following months, humanity did exactly what it promised. Ships that had carried weapons now carried supplies. Soldiers who had destroyed Velthary bases now helped rebuild them. Scientists who had designed weapons of war now designed tools for peace. The galaxy watched in amazement. Observer. Killith updated her species classification one final time. She spent a long time thinking about the right words. Finally, she wrote, humans. Not prey, not predators. Something else entirely. They are warriors who hate war. Destroyers who prefer to build. Killers who choose mercy. They carry within them the capacity for unimaginable violence and unimaginable compassion. They have looked into the darkest parts of their own nature and decided to walk toward the light. She paused, then added her final observation. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. Do not test their patience. And never, ever threaten their children. Because the galaxy has now seen what happens when humanity is forced to fight. It is a sight that no one should ever have to see again. On Earth, in New Sol, President Cho Moran ordered the Hall of Remembrance sealed once more. I hope we never have to open it again, she said to General Shin Tai-Wu. Do I, he replied. But if we do, we will be ready. The doors closed. The lights went out. The weapons returned to their long sleep, and humanity went back to being traitors and diplomats and peacemakers. But the galaxy never forgot. The galaxy would never forget. And that was exactly what humanity wanted, because the best way to prevent a war is to make sure everyone knows exactly what will happen if one starts, and now everyone knew. The end.